in a state of confusion and surprise.
We fear this. We fear that they have something out that the majority of the people don't know about.
Olan tüm halkların hakları gibi haklar. Ne aşağı ne yukarı, ne fazla ne az.
Pent-up feelings that may result from decades of repression and people who've had members of their family killed by that regime.
A lot of killers. Get a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
But I won't attack it because someone sicks me on. I don't let anybody use me to fight their battles.
Hello and welcome to Varn Blog. And today I'm going to talk about why a lot of the people commenting on my YouTube are fundamentally confused about what the mission is here. And I have to take some responsibility that it seems like many people think that I am encouraging an electoral strategy with the Democrats. But if you're going to show the people who are acting on the left to themselves so you can learn better from them, you have to meet them where they are. Now, a lot of the comments that I get are, why don't you have X come on and do activist trainings? One, this is a terrible medium for that. All right. YouTube is not the medium for me to train you on how to do activism. The activism you do is domain specific. You need to learn how to do it in action, and it needs to be something you don't passively consume. Furthermore, most of you don't watch it when I do those videos. The most important thing that I do on this channel is to illustrate the history of the left to you. And you know what? Most of you find that boring. You'd rather passively take part in complaining about the democratic process while also engaging in hate responding to the people who have an engagement with the Democrats and the DSA's apparatus. I'm not a DSA member. Right? I spend most of my time critiquing the DSA, actually. But the thing is, you meet people where they are. Furthermore, the idea that you're going to run independent candidates from an independent socialist party in a meaningful sense in the United States without having built up a massive institutional apparatus to counter the existing parties first is a joke. It's just a joke. I want you to think about this. The entirety of the U.S. section of SALT, which is an entire tradition of Trotskyism from the militant tendency, goes into basically keeping Kasama Sawat's seat in one district in one city. And it's the only major metropolitan area that has a socialist on it. So you have a group that had, at one point, 5,000 to 6,000 members, now probably about 1,000 to 3,000 affiliated members, 2,000 which are probably in the DSA, devoted to keeping one person at one seat in one city. Then people ask me, why don't I have local independent candidates on my show? You may notice I don't have any candidates on my show. I don't have DSA candidates on my show. I don't have Green Party candidates on my show. I don't have, because I don't have Socialist Party candidates on my show, etc. Howie Hawkins has not been invited to my show. Because as an electoral strategy, podcasts are a terrible medium for anything nationally. Hell, 40% of my audience isn't even in the United States. So why on earth would you expect me to give you all this information about local organizing and or local candidates? That would be a poor use of the platform. It wouldn't even help the candidates because most of my audience cannot vote for them. Many of the comments illustrated here that I get on a daily basis about when I'm talking to some reformists, or conversely, when reformists complain that I'm too hard on the Democrats and the DSA, which is the other half of the complaints I get. It doesn't take in the nature of the medium or the purpose of the podcast and YouTube channel. My purpose is to educate you about the history of the left and its issues. Why the national strategy on relying on the Democrats was a bad idea. It is not to replicate what should be done in systemic organizations that you should be building yourselves. By the way, I am in a union. I take part in 2 different organizations outside of that union as well, none of which claim to be parties. They don't come up on the show because it would not help my show for me to do that. And it would not help those organizations to get an international audience of niche socialists who cannot necessarily directly contribute to our needs. If you don't understand the nature and the medium of what you're commenting on, you are often wasting mine and your time. And frankly, if you have a problem with that content, I don't really need you. Now, my patrons actually don't have this problem. And I don't know what people say on comments on the shows on podcasts, because I don't go and check Apple all the time to see, although I highly doubt it's the same kind of criticism. But a lot of what you're asking me to do or my guest to do doesn't make sense. For this is the wrong format for it. If you want to learn how to do activism 101, go do it. Although it's kind of circular, right? You want me to get activists to train you on something that works when they are clearly not working? Because actually, right now, all the strategies adopted by, quote, socialists are not working. Most of the sectarian left groups are dying, and the ones that aren't are tiny and mostly full of teenagers who throw the word working class out just to project upon the world, since they're not even in a class scenario themselves yet. They're just children of a class, and they're mostly students. But this gives me something about the fundamental misunderstanding about what left media is supposed to do. All right, the purpose of publishing agitation is to get people to see the problems and organize themselves around how to fix them, not to give you activist 101 trainings. There are already plenty of organizations who will give them to you. And they will be niche specific. Doing generic trainings on an educational podcast makes no sense. It would be a waste of effort. It's not a best use of the medium, and it's not particularly smart. Some of you are so addicted to your parasocial relationships, you expect them to deliver everything to you. And then when they don't, you complain that they don't reflect your community. I have no evidence that you have a community. For example, the working class people I know don't vote. Almost always true. But are the working class people you know politicized at all? No, they're generally not. Get workers' organizations on. What organizations? Do you mean business unions? People complain about that. Do you mean the IWW? Some people think that's just LARPing at this point. Do you mean your anarchist friends, or your Stalinist friends, or your Maoist friends, or your Trotskyist friends, or whatever organization that you probably met through the fucking internet? No, that's not a working class organization. Just calling yourself a working class organization doesn't make you one. And in fact, I would venture so much to say is there are almost no cross-sectional, functional, mass working class organizations in the United States, or even in most of the world. There are exceptions, and we could talk about them, but most of them are not on a rising horizon. So projecting that and wanting someone to give it to you when it's your job to start to build it, if you have the right class position in the first place, is a waste of time. It is hot air, and I don't have time for it. So if that's what you want, I don't need you in my audience, because you don't understand the purpose of the show. Have a good day.